Good afternoon. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. The European Court of Human Rights, ECHR, ordered Turkey on Tuesday to release Selahattin Demirtaş, the jailed former head of the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party, HDP.
Selahattin Demirtaş, the former co-chairman of the People's Democratic Party, HDP, was sentenced in September to more than 4 years in jail on terrorism charges, after having been detained for 2 years while on trial. The court found that the judicial authorities had extended Mr. Demirtaş's detention on grounds that could not be regarded as sufficient to justify its duration, the court said in a statement. During the presidential elections this year, Demirtaş campaigned against President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, appearing on state television from his jail cell. Erdoğan won the elections, and Demirtaş came third with 8.4% of the vote. The court also criticized the Turkish government for keeping Demirtaş in jail during the elections and last year's referendum on changing the constitution to give the president more powers. The extensions of Demirtaş's detention, especially during 2 crucial campaigns, pursued the predominant ulterior purpose of stifling pluralism and limiting freedom of political debate, the court said. Following the ruling, Demirtaş's lawyer Mahsuni Karaman said he had applied for the politician's immediate release at a criminal court in Ankara. After this decision, every second Mr. Demirtaş remains jailed is a restriction on freedom, he said. Meanwhile, President Erdoğan rejected the court's decision, saying that the ruling was not binding. There are many things we can do in response. We'll make our counter move and finish the job, Erdoğan told reporters in parliament. Justice Minister Abdülhamit Gül said the final decision on Demirtaş's cases would be made by the Turkish judiciary. A Turkish court sentenced Demirtaş 2 months ago to more than 4 years in jail on terrorism charges related to a speech he gave in 2013. He faces several other terrorism-related charges and a total of 142 years in prison if convicted.
Joining us from London now to answer our questions on the ECHR's decision regarding former HDP leader Demirtaş is Başak Çalı, who is a professor of international law at the Herties School of Governance in Berlin and the director of the Center for Global Public Law at Koç University in Istanbul. Good afternoon, Professor Çalı. Welcome to This Week in Turkey.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
So as we've just heard in the previous news video, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that Turkey must free Demirtaş. First and foremost, how do you evaluate this ruling?
Well, this is a very significant judgment that is coming out from the European Court of Human Rights. The judgment is very lengthy. It's a very complicated judgment. It says quite a lot of things, and it's about 76 pages, which is quite unusual. I think the judgment is really significant for 4 reasons. The first is that even though the European Court in Strasbourg didn't think that the initial decision to detain Demirtaş was not a violation of the convention, his continuous detention through 2 years has actually violated the convention. But in addition to that, the court has also underlined that this meant that as a member of parliament, Mr. Demirtaş was not able to take part in political life and to represent those who voted for him. The third part, which is very significant, is that the court underlined that the continuing detention of Demirtaş was not a purely legal decision, but that it found that it may have served a political purpose alongside a legal purpose. And finally, I think the bit that you also highlighted is that the court, in very clear language, asked for the immediate release of Demirtaş from pretrial detention unless there is new evidence that would put forward any reasons for his detention. So quite a lot of reasons why this is a very significant judgment for the court.
So, Professor Çalı, this decision entails the first Article 18 judgment against Turkey. And from what we gather so far from the recent analyses and also through our conversation with you, we see that this appears to be a very important feature. So for our viewers now, can you explain what Article 18 is and why it's important?
Certainly. So the Article 18 of the Convention is a very short little sentence, actually, in the Convention itself, which says that the restrictions applied to limit any rights in the Convention cannot be for any other purpose other than those that are prescribed in the Convention. So what does that mean exactly? This is a very legal sort of little sentence. This one particular article where the court has used this to kind of say that, well, sometimes there are violations of the convention in all member states, but sometimes these violations are not just an error of judgment, but that they might be serving a hidden purpose or an illegitimate agenda. So Article 18 is a place where the court actually tells us that they may not be, in a situation where they have purely legal reason to restrict the convention. This is the first judgment against Turkey that actually has under Article 18 element to it. And this is a very significant indicator because the court is really saying that the health of rule of law in Turkey is something that might be at risk. So that's why it's also very significant.
Mm-hmm. So a tweet you shared on Tuesday states that this was, I quote, also the first judgment where the court found the detention of a single individual not only a threat to applicants' rights, but also a threat to the whole democratic system itself. Could you elaborate?
So this is the wording of the court. What you've just read is part of the judgment of the court itself. Usually it's very difficult to show that a restriction of a right is carried out for a hidden agenda or for an illegitimate purpose, because the question is how you prove that something was serving a different motive than it was actually formally prescribed. This is a very interesting question about evidence, and usually, obviously, you have to sort of put together, a larger sort of story to say that, detention of a person is serving an illegitimate purpose. Here, what the court has done by actually giving us this particular sentence was to underline that actually, if you look at the detention of Demirtaş, you can't just look at it from the rights of this individual person, but with the context of events in Turkey in the past 4 or 5 years, and that his detention is not just about him, but a political debate in Turkey itself. So the court is actually, the reason that I'm saying it's very significant is because the court is linking the detention of one person to the health of democracy in Turkey.
So this obviously is a decision on Demirtaş, but it is also one that holds numerous implications on Turkey's relations with the EU. So what, in your opinion, does this ruling mean in terms of EU-Turkey relations? In other words, where does it go from here?
It's really hard for me to answer this particular question because obviously the European Court of Human Rights is the court of the members of the Council of Europe. And that's a bigger Europe that is made up of 47 member states. And Turkey has been in the Council of Europe since 1950. Now, the EU is a completely separate institution, and it's an institution that Turkey would like to be a member of, and it's an official candidate to become a member of the European Union. But what we could say is that in principle, the EU has always demanded from Turkey to comply with the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights. So this is not anything new. Also in past judgments, this has been part of the conversation between the EU and Turkey in terms of its accession and its fulfillment of various criteria. Now, this judgment is very specific because it asks for the release of a political leader. And because of its very clear language on this, I would expect all actors, including all the EU actors, to make the same demand, because this is a demand made by a judgment. And I would say that this will be an ongoing theme in any future dialogue between Turkey and EU.
Finally, Professor Çalı, so far Ankara is showing no signs to no signs of an agreement to comply with this ruling, as President Erdogan has said that this was non-binding. He has openly called it non-binding. So my question to you, to conclude, as a professor of international law, is what happens if Ankara refuses to comply with this decision? What's next?
Right. So obviously, from a very clear legal perspective, the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights are binding. This is by virtue of our membership to the convention. So I think there's no legal ambiguity about that because we are a party to the convention. What happens when the judgments are not implemented, and in particular this judgment? Now, when a judgment is delivered by the court, it doesn't become final. There's about a 3-month time period where we call the judgment is not yet final, which means that Turkey could appeal to the Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights for a revision of this judgment. I'm not sure if this is going to be the case. It may be. And this is not necessarily granted, so the Grand Chamber may refuse to review the judgment. But then once it's final, I think all of the Council of Europe institutions will have to demand from Turkey to comply with the judgment. And this will be part of the supervision of the execution of this judgment before the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe. What happens when a judgment is not fully executed? It will remain on the agenda, and the significance that it has to be executed will not change. It is still going to be binding in relation to Turkey. So there will be various resolutions from the Committee of Ministers. There will be probably quite a lot of follow-up, and there will be constant demands from Turkey to implement the judgment as soon as possible. So this is what the process will look like.
Thank you very much, Professor Çalı, for your comments and for being with us today.
Thank you, my pleasure. Thanks.
Today, we were joined by Professor Başak Çalı, who commented on the European Court of Human Rights decision on Selahattin Demirtaş, the jailed former leader of the HDP, and we'll continue with our next news video now. Russian President Vladimir Putin visited Turkey on Monday to attend the completion ceremony of the offshore section of the Turkish Stream pipeline project.
During his visit, Vladimir Putin and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan discussed bilateral relations and regional issues. The two leaders pointed out the importance of the Turkish Stream. Speaking at the ceremony, the Turkish President Erdogan said, "For us, Russia is a friend which we can have a long-term cooperation with and is an important natural gas supplier. In cooperation with our Russian friends, we have reliably carried out a very technically demanding project that meets high security standards. We also raised its already high resilience standards to an even higher level. I believe our solidarity with Putin and the Russian people will be foreshadowing of bigger projects," Erdogan added. Meanwhile, the Russian president, who denied the political nature of the project, suggested that the most difficult part of the project had been completed. In his speech, Putin emphasized that the project wouldn't have been completed without the confidence of the parties, and thanked Erdogan for his political will and courage. The Russian leader also stated that the Turkish Stream, along with the Akkuyu nuclear plant, will be the symbols of the growing bilateral relations between the two countries. When completed, the Turkish Stream is planned to deliver the Russian natural gas across Turkey onto Europe through 2 pipelines. The first pipeline will meet 35% of Turkey's natural gas consumption alone, while the main focus of the second pipeline will be the southern and southeastern European market. The first deliveries are expected to take place starting from late 2019.
Justice and Development Party AKP spokesperson said on Wednesday that a possible coalition in the local elections with the Nationalist Movement Party MHP is looking positive.
Speaking to media in capital Ankara, after a meeting between AKP chairman President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and MHP leader Devlet Bahçeli in the presidential complex, spokesperson Ömer Çelik said, "I can say that we are in a positive position for collaboration with MHP in local elections." Çelik said deputy chairs of the two political parties will gather in the upcoming days to present their reports to the party heads on the possible alliance in the local elections. It was a very pleasant meeting. We are in a very positive spot in terms of collaboration in the local elections, Çelik said, without elaborating. Çelik also said the AKP will unveil its mayoral candidates for Istanbul, Ankara and Izmir, as well as for 40 other provinces on November 24th. After their joint efforts to win the presidential system of government referendum in 2017, AKP and MHP formed the People's Alliance ahead of the June 24 elections. However, the two party leaders have not yet agreed on collaborating in the local elections on March 31st, 2019.
Turkish authorities have released a group of 12 human rights activists and academics who were detained on November 16th under an investigation into Anadolu Kültür, a cultural institution headed by jailed philanthropist Osman Kavala.
Detention warrants were issued on November 16th for 20 people as part of an investigation into Anadolu Kültür, whose chairman, Osman Kavala, has been jailed for more than a year. Turkish police had detained 14 human rights activists on November 16th in connection with the probe. The detainees include prominent academics Professor Turgut Tarhanlı of Istanbul Bilgi University and Professor Betül Tambay of Boğaziçi University. Tarhanlı, Tambay, and 11 other detainees were released under judicial control on Saturday after they testified to the police in Istanbul. Yiğit Aksakoğlu, an academic employed by Istanbul's Bilgi University, was arrested in connection with the case. Activist and businessman Osman Kavala has been jailed for over a year without an indictment.
Turkey's national football team was defeated by Sweden and relegated to League C in the UEFA Nations League on Saturday. Now let's take a look at what's on in Istanbul next week.
In collaboration with the French Institute of Turkey, XXF, Very French Festival will feature Charles Pazzi at the Zorlu PSM tomorrow. Born of an Italian father and a French mother, Charles Pazzi signed with Blue Note in 2015 for 3 albums. Pazzi released his first album, Mainly Blue, when he was just 22 and gained critical acclaim. The album debuted at number 5 on Memphis International Blues Challenge, and Pazzi's fame started to travel out of France. In 2017, Pazzi released Bricks with the Blue Note label. The 22nd Istanbul Theatre Festival continues this weekend. The festival audience will hold their breath as they watch the Nocturnal Symposium this Saturday at Zorlu PSM. Adapted from Erik de Volder's play and directed by Mesut Arslan, this performance shines through for its stage design, narrative, and interaction with the audience. A mother, 3 sons, and an absent father discover the limits of communication, moving with spinning tops around the excellent scenic design by Lawrence Malstaff and Meryem Bayram. Mesut Arslan, in contrast with the linearity of the text, creates a universal meaning that is much more than a matter of watching and listening around the circular axis of feelings and intuition. He transforms the tragedy of a family into a daily ritual.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. Thanks for tuning in and hope to see you again next Friday at 5 p.m. Goodbye.